Welcome to our class on Chassidus. We're going to be learning a beautiful Chassidic discourse from the Rebbe, a very deep Kabbalistic one. The name of the Chassidic discourse is called וחזקת והיית לאיש. The Rebbe said this Chassidic discourse on Monday of Parshas Piנחas, h'tשכ, Tmuz, the 19th day of the month of Tmuz in the year Tavshin Chavches, 54 years ago. And the Rebbe went on to certify and edit this Chassidic discourse in honor of h'tשכ Tmuz, the 19th day of the month of Tmuz, in the year Tavshin Memtes, 33 years ago. So the name of the Chassidic discourse is based on the verse in the prophets, in Kings, where King David tells his son, King Solomon, וחזקת והיית לאיש. You should be strong and you should be a man. Now the Rebbe says it's known what the Rebbe Rashab said, a Chassidic discourse, in honor of the 7th day of the Bar Mitzvah celebration of his only son, the previous Rebbe, which took place in the year Tafresh Nun Gimel h'tשכ Tmuz. And it's interesting is because we know we have Shabbat brachas after our wedding, but in certain holy people they do 7-day celebration after Bar Mitzvah as well. So this Chassidic discourse that the Rebbe Rashab said in honor of the celebration the 7th day after Bar Mitzvah, which is actually it was part of a series of 7 Chassidic discourses that the Rebbe Rashab said, and the first one was the Chassidic discourse called Tefillin, the Mori Alma, Tefillin of Hashem. What does it say inside? And he started to say it on Yud Beis Tammuz, the 12th day of the month of Tammuz, the day of the Bar Mitzvah of the previous Rebbe. So this Chassidic discourse is the name of the Chassidic discourse which he said on the 7th day of after the Bar Mitzvah. So he says like this: what's the connection with this verse? וחזקת והיית לאיש. You should be strong and you should be a man with a bar mitzvah, and it's on a literal sense, because if you look in the prophets, it's a whole different story. It's not talking about a bar mitzvah over there. It's talking about, unfortunately, before King David was going to die, and he tells him to be strong, be a man, etc. So what's the connection of a bar mitzvah? So Rebbe says, because it's known that what happens when someone becomes 13, that's when you become obligated to do the mitzvahs. And so what does that mean? Why are you obligated to do the mitzvahs when you become 13? Because we know it says in the Torah, ish. And that's when we know that you become a man. So since the verse says, וחזקת, you should be strong and you should be a man, and we know on 13 you become a man, you have to be obligated to do the mitzvahs, that's a simple connection. So Rebbe asked, 1 second. What are we saying? When someone becomes 13, you become a ish, you become a man. Why? Because the Torah says so. So it's a natural thing. When someone becomes 13, they become a man. So why are you saying, וחזקת, you should be strong and you should be a man? At 13, you become a man. That's question number 1. Also, Rebbe says we have to understand, what is the quality of someone to become 13 to become a person, a man? That means, in Hebrew, it's called they become a bardas, they become someone of intellect, someone of logic, someone of understanding. Now, das, we know, Chabad is chacham being a das. Das is part of intellect. And especially, like it's explained in the Chassidic discourse, Isa Medrash Chilm of that year, Tafresh Nun Gimel, that's one of the Chassidic discourses that the previous Rebbe said in honor of his Bar Mitzvah celebration. And it says over there clearly that the quality of someone that becomes a Bar Mitzvah is because then they receive the etzem hamoichin, the essence of intellect. So we see that Bar Mitzvah is associated, at age 13, associated with intellect. So what is this whole idea that we call an ish? And ish, we know, is referring to midos, emotions. So what's the connection between emotions when it's supposed to be all about intellect? So the Rebbe goes on to explain, he says like this. In the part of the Chassidic discourse where the Rebbe Rashab explains, so he talks about the quality of Yosef HaTzadik, Joseph, over Yaakov Avinu. In other words, and he explains like this. When Yaakov, when he draws down godly energy, he draws it down to the world of Atzilut. We know there's 4 worlds, Atzilus, Bri, Yetzirah, Asiyah. So Yaakov draws down godly energy to the world of Atzilus. On the other hand, Yosef, HaTzadik, Yosef draw down godly energy further down to the world of Bria, Yetzirah, Asiyah. That's what the Rebbe Rashab explains there. In other words, and Rebbe says, a side note, in this Chassidic discourse, he speaks about the quality of Yosef over Yaakov, that Yaakov only brings down the energy into the world of Atzilus, and Yosef brings it down to Bria, Asiyah, because the first name of the Bar Mitzvah boy is Yosef. So the reason why he did it was to awaken powerful spiritual energies of the work of Yosef, the previous Rebbe, to bring it down in this world. As a side note, he's saying the reason why he's talking about the quality of Yosef over Yaakov, because that was the first name of Yosef, the previous Rebbe, to bring down those energies into him. Okay, now, but back to the point. So over there he speaks about the quality of Yosef over Yaakov. Now, in order to understand the tremendous quality of Yosef HaTzadik, so first he explains Yaakov, what Yaakov is spiritually. In other words, by knowing what Yaakov is, then we'll know Yosef is is a step above it. And he explains like this. Based on a verse in the prophet Nehemiah says as follows. Atahu Hashem levadecha. You are Hashem alone. And then it says as follows. At asisa. Now, at is written without a hey. We pronounce it ata, but it's written without a. Ata sisa you made, as a shemayim the heaven. The ata and you, mechayas kulam, give everything life force. That's the verse he brings. So there's three levels in the verse. Ata hu Hashem levadecha, ata sisa as a shemayim, the ata is mechayas kulam. So, and he explains as follows. The first level is ata hu Hashem levadecha. Ata is you, Hashem, God, levadecha alone. So what is it referring to when the verse says Atu Hashem levadecha? What level is it talking about? So that's talking about, I'll say it in Hebrew, I'll translate it, Oir Ein Sof, the infinite light, of before any contraction, before any concealment, before any symptom, Oir Ein Sof. So again, when the first part of the verse, when it says Atu Hashem levadecha, what is it referring to? It's referring to Oir Ein Sof, the infinite light before the tzimtzum. In this level of the infinite light before the tzimtzum, he explains there's three levels there. Because like the verse says, Ata, Hu, and Hashem. What is the three levels of the infinite light before the tzimtzum? So the first level is Ata. What is Ata? Referring to the, and I'll say it in Hebrew, I'll translate it, Atzmus HaMa'or, the essence of the source of the light. So Ata is referring to the essence of the source of light, and this is again all before the tzimtzum. And it says clearly Ata. On this powerful, before the tzimtzum, the essence of the infinite light, it says Ata you. Why? Because when referring to the essence of the infinite light, the essence of the Ma'or, the source of light, that's all over. Because Ashmas is all over. Because the fact is, and in a revealed way, because the Rebbe used the example that says, Shem Shemayim Meshaga B'fi Kol. Everyone says Baruch Hashem. What are you referring to? The essence of the infinite light. So that's the first level. Ata, the essence of the infinite light, which is all over. Hu and Hashem, those two levels, is two levels already, not in the Ma'or, in the source of light, but two levels in the light. What's the two levels in the light? The Etzem Ma'or, the essence of the light. Hu, the essence, right? The essence of the light. And then, Havaya is referring to the expansion of the light. Yud Kei Vav Kei, the expansion of the light. Like he explains in detail in the Chassidic Discourse. So again, so to recap, what are we talking about? Atahu Hashem. We're talking about the infinite light before the tzimtzum. The first level is the essence of the source of the light. Then you have the essence of the light, and then you have the expansion of the light. On all these three levels, which is only still in the first level, he says, levadecha. And what means levadecha alone? Because when you're dealing with the essence of the infinite light, and the source of the light, and the expansion is nothing else other than Hashem. Because all the light that existed before the tzimtzum, even a light that has some kind of connection with the world, Havaya, right, with the expansion of light, it's still part of Atzmusay, the essence of Hashem, and doesn't have its own existence. So again, to recap, what's the first level? The first level is referring to the light which is before the tzimtzum. Three levels within that. The essence of the Ma'or, the essence of the Ma'or, the essence of the source of light, the essence of the light, and then the expansion of light. And that is, like the Rebbe says, it's all over, because that's Hashem is all over the place. Now, that's level number one. What does the second part of the verse say? At asisa hashemayim. You made the heaven. What is that referring to? Already Hashem is making the heaven. So that's the light, the way it becomes a source for creation of the world. At asisa hashemayim, the light that's connected to the world. That's the second level of light. And that's why it says, At Asisa. Like we said, that all At over here doesn't have a hay in it. It's lacking the hay. Why is the hay not there? Because the light, which is connected to the world, if the light before the tzimtzum, you can't have a world. But once you have the light, in order to come down to the world, you have to have a tzimtzum, you have to have a concealment, you have to have a contraction. So part of the light got concealed. And what happened? Only a short part came into the world. And that's why he says, Ata Sisa without the hay. Why? Because the fact that the light was able to be a source of light for this world, Asisa Shemayim, so it happened what? Because there's something missing. And that's why the hay was taken away. Again, so the second level is the light where it's a source for the world, which basically, you have to have the tzimtzum, so it's not the same light as before the tzimtzum, and that's why actually the Ata is lacking a hay, and it says At. That's the second level. What's the third level? The Ata Machayas Kulam. You give life to everything. What is that referring to? That's referring to already, which is called the Kav, which is basically the line of light that comes in, and through the Kav, that's how the worlds have energy. So the Kav is the source for the energy, the Chayas, the life force in the worlds, after they're created. In other words, so you see that the Kav has two components to it. The Kav, which is the line, has two components. On one hand, it's a Kav, which is basically a line, which is short and it's contracted, obviously. But nevertheless, from this Kav, which is short contraction, from the Kav itself, you have the creation of the existence of the worlds. But nevertheless, the light it's bringing in a light from before the tzimtzum. And because it's connected to before the tzimtzum, that's how it's able to bring in light into this world. So the third level again is Atamachayas Kulam, referring to the Kav. On one hand, it's contracted, it's small, it's finite, but nevertheless it's connected to the infinite, and that creates a perfect fusion to create the possible energy to the world can exist. And based on what Rebbe explains, that's why it says this Ata, and we're referring to the third Ata, which is referring to the Kav, the Ata Machayas Kulam. So over there already you do have the hay. But the question is, what do you mean? By Ata Sisa Shemayim, the higher level, you took away the hay because it was a tzimtzum. Over here you're putting back the hay. Why is that? And it's literally it's spelled the same way like the light from before the tzimtzum. Atu Hashem Lavadecha. And he explains very simple. Because this component of the Kav, that it gives life force to the world. How can it give life force to the world? Is because in the Kav, you actually have the revelation of the light of before the tzimtzum. So in other words, just to recap before we go forward, what Rebbe is saying is that there's three levels. There's a level of the light before the tzimtzum, and in there was three levels. The essence of the source of the light, the essence of the light and the expansion. Then you have the second level, where it's the light, which is a source of creation over there the tzimtzum took place, and that's why it's lacking the hay. And then you have the third level, which is the Kav, which already is a tzimtzum in there, but it's connected to the light from before the tzimtzum, and that's how it creates the energy in the world. Now, the Rebbe says it's possible to say this that he brings in the Chassidic Discourse that when he says the Atom Achayas Kulam is referring to the Kav, the third level. So he brings over there a language from the Tikkun Zoya. The Zoya says like this. I'll say it in Aramaic and I'll translate it. So this flow of energy is just like the soul that gives life force to the body. So the same thing also gives life force to the body. That's what he brings from the Zoya. So why does he bring the idea that it gives a life force to the body? He wants to bring out that when we say the Ata Machayas Kulam, so Machaya we know could be translated in many places in Chassidus. Don't read Machaya that gives us energy, but it creates everything. So he brings from the Zohar to show us, don't translate the Ata Machayas Kulam that it's creating everything. But like the Zohar says, Chayim Legufa. It's giving energy, it's giving energy. Just like a soul fuels the body, it doesn't create the body. The soul fuels the body, it doesn't create the body. The same thing also, the Kav does not create the world, it gives fuel to the world from obviously a higher source. And that's why the Kav is known as a briach, a beam, ha'tichoin. Like we know in the Beis Mikdash, there was the middle beam that went from one side all the way to the other, went all the way around. The same thing also, the Kav is a briach, ha'tichoin, it goes all the way from the highest level, Atahu Hashem Lavadecha. The Kav is connected to Hashem, which is before creating the heaven and the earth, together with Ata Sisas Shemayim by the Tzimtzum, and goes down into the world, that even this world, which is created by the Tzimtzum, which is the Ata with the Alta Hey, what we should have in this world is the revelation of the infinite light, the Bligvul of before the Tzimtzum, Atu L'Vadecha. So you see that the Kav obviously has something very, very powerful, because on one hand it's the Kav, it's a Tzimtzum, but nevertheless it's connected to the highest level and brings in that highest level into this world. Now, so what do we see from here? The Rebbe says that through the Kav, which is the third level we're talking about, we're able to draw in the Ein Sof, the infinite light of before the Tzimtzum, but not only draw it in, we're able to draw it into this world. So therefore, the Rebbe says something very powerful. Obviously, the Kav has a quality and something superior to the light of before the Tzimtzum. Think about it. The light before the Tzimtzum doesn't come into this world. What comes in this world? The Kav. Now, Kav on one hand, it has a Tzimtzum, it's a finite Kav, but it can bring that infinite light into this world. So you see, it has something over the light of before the Tzimtzum that can bring that light into this world. In other words. And the Rebbe explains. The light of before the Tzimtzum, so before Hashem made the Tzimtzum, that light was all over. What happened by the Tzimtzum? So the light of the before of the Tzimtzum went into hiding, so to speak. It got concealed. Now, the concealment that took place through the Tzimtzum affected also the infinite light. Now, it's even the light which is above having a connection to the world. What did it affect? It didn't, God forbid, make that the light before the Tzimtzum is not infinite anymore. For sure, it's still infinite. The difference is it's concealed. What means it's concealed? It went back into its source, and it's not revealed in this world. Because before the Tzimtzum, the infinite light was all over, even in this world, but it was infinite. Once the Tzimtzum took place, so it doesn't shine here. What does that mean? It's not revealed here. So the infinite light before the Tzimtzum went into a concealed state in its source. And like it's explained in many, many places, in reference to the Oyer HaBligvul, the light which has no limit, the infinite light, the Tzimtzum does not, God forbid, create a concealment on it. In other words, when we say it doesn't create a concealment, the light did not change. In other words, for the light of before the Tzimtzum is shining even in a revealed way, even in the place of the concealment. Because for the light of the infinite light from before, the light didn't change. Where was the change? The change was from the world perspective, concealment perspective, that was created from the concealment. In other words, the tzimtzum, the concealment affected that the infinite light should not be felt in this world. So the point is like this. Practically speaking, in this world, is the infinite light here? Sure it is. We don't see it. We don't see it, but the infinite light is here. But the fact is, it does not shine in this world. But through the Kav, through this light that came down in this world, that infinite light, which we don't see, is actually in the world, in a revealed way. And the world can also feel its presence. So therefore, since the Kav has the power to accomplish something that the infinite light does not accomplish on its own, because the infinite light on its own, we said, it's shining. We don't see it. Through the Kav, we can have a connection to it. So obviously the Kav has something, an ingredient, which is more powerful than the light of before the Tzimtzum. Even in the light of Bligvul. And like he explains in the Chassidic Discourse, that the Kav is able to pierce the darkness and the contraction. Where does that come from? Because when you pierce something, it comes from Gvura. It comes from strength, from power to break through the shield. How does the Kav have the power to do it? Because the source, the source of the Kav is even higher than the light of before the Tzimtzum. So the Rebbe explains like this. Yes, the Kav has something more powerful, but where does it have the power? And the answer is it doesn't, because the Kav is actually coming from a higher source from the infinite light. What does that mean? The Rebbe explains like this. That the light of before the Tzimtzum cannot be revealed in the world that was created from the concealment, because the light and the concealment is opposites. Light is revelation, concealment is opposites. So once you create concealment, light cannot shine in this world. But on the other hand, the Kav is coming from a place of the infinite light which is before the Tzimtzum. In Kabbalistic terms, the source of the Kav is a place called Tiferes Hanelim. Tiferes, which is concealed at a very, very high level. On that high level, and we know Tiferes, for example, there's Chesed and Gvura. Chesed is right, Gvura is left. Tiferes is the fusion, on a certain way to explain it. They're able to blend the two. In order to blend the two, it's because it comes from a higher source. All the middle spheres come from higher. The same thing also, Tiferes Hanelim is the highest level of Tiferes, which is before the light of the Tzimtzum, and the Kav is sourced over there. And over there, it includes, and it can actually, opposites could exist. What means the opposite could exist? Revelation and concealment could exist there. So the Kav comes from a place that revelation and concealment could exist. So based on this, Rebbe explains the three components in the verse. What are the three components? Atu Hashem Lavadecha, the first level, the light before the Tzimtzum. Atu Sisishmayim, the way the light is a source for the creation of the world, or the concealment. V'yata Mechayis Kulon, which is referring to the Kav. All these three start off with which word? Ata. What is Ata referring to? The essence. The essence of essence. And it's referring to the three different levels of the revelation of the essence. In other words, the first one, Ata Hu Hashem Lavadecha, is referring to the revelation of the infinite light of Atzmos. And we know that part is everywhere. And because there's no place that Hashem doesn't exist. Ata Hu Hashem Lavadecha. So the first part is referring to the revelation of the essence of the infinite light, which is all over. All over. The second part is Ata Sisas Shemayim, is the revelation of the finite part of the infinite part of Hashem, the component that it's not able to give off light. That's also a quality of Atzmos, that it cannot give off light. And a deeper level is, on the level of Ata Sisas Shemayim, is the fact that the Mitziusai Mi'atzmusai, that it exists on its own. And as we know that the creation of something, Asisas Shemayim, who can create something? Only something that has the power of Mitziusai Mi'atzmusai. So that's the second level. And what's the third level? The Ata Mechayes Kulam is the revelation of the simplicity of the essence of Hashem, which is not limited into revelation and concealment, and therefore can unify both. So again, just to recap, what they were saying is there's three levels. They're all in revelation. The first revelation is the infinite part of Hashem, which is technically all over. The second part is the revelation of the concealment of Hashem. And the third part of the revelation is the simplicity, where yes and no are the same thing. Revelation and concealment is all the same thing. So that's the basis of the Rebbe explains. That's why he says V'ata Mechayes Kulam. So in the third level it says V'ata. If you notice an extra vav, not ata, it says V'ata with extra vav. Why V'ata with an extra vav? Because the vav is an expression of the revelation of the essence part of Hashem, which is in the middle, the middle one, which is referring to Tiferes. And like we explained before, right, Tiferes has the power that it can unify Chesed and Gvura. And like we know, it's brought down another verse in the prophet that says, HaGadoil, which is referring to Chesed, HaGibor, which is Gvura, V'Hanoira. Over there also you see that it uses the extra vav when it's referring to Hanoira, which is referring to the idea of Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferes. Now, and again, so you see by the word V'Hanoira is an extra vav. Why? Because in Tiferes, you have the revelation of the essence of the infinite part of Hashem, which is higher than the vision of this side, that side, etc., which is called, in Kabbalah, it's called El Elyon, the God on high. And because it's connected, the Ata, and so high, it has the power to unite both sides, Chesed and Gvura. Now, based on this, Rebbe explains, this is also the explanation why Yaakov, we know that the Avos is Avraham, Chesed, Yitzchok is Gvura, and Yaakov is Tiferes. And if you give a look, so Yaakov is Tiferes. Now, Yaakov is spelled Yud Ayin Kuves. If you play around with the letters, it's the same letters as Yibaka. What does Yibaka mean? To pierce through. Tiferes has the power to pierce through, like the prophet says, Oz Yibaka Kashacharei Recha. Then it's going to pierce through, just like when the light comes on in the morning when it's dark. It pierces through the darkness. In other words, that the light of the Kav is able to pierce through the darkness of the concealment, and literally in the physical world which God has concealed, you're able to join the light of before the Tzimtzum. The reason is because the source is, like we learned, from Tiferes HaNelam, which is the idea of Yaakov. Now, so what did we learn so powerfully? The three levels. The light of before the Tzimtzum, the light which is the source of the creation of the world, and then the Kav, which has the power to take from the highest down to the lowest, which we see it's already connected the idea of Yaakov, which is Tiferes, which has the power to pierce through and connect the highest to the lowest. Now, the Rebbe says, we know that this powerful Kav, that the source is Tiferes HaNelam, higher than the light of before the Tzimtzum, and goes through the Tzimtzum, and it brings down the powerful light into this world. So the Kav only has the power to bring the light where? Into which world? The first world, the world of Atzilus. And like he explains in the Chassidic Discourse, this that Yaakov, like we already learned, Yaakov is the same letters as Yibaka, that he's able to pierce through, the Kav is able to pierce through, which is like compared to the middle beam, which goes from the beginning to the end, which is referring to the highest level of heaven until the highest level down below. In other words, the highest level of heaven to down below is referring to down below till where? Till the world of Atzilus. So the Kav only is able to pierce through till Atzilus. But that's not enough. We need a Kav to come down into Bri Yitzir Asiyah. So in order for the Kav to come down into Bri Yitzir Asiyah, Yaakov's Yibaka, he pierces through to the world of Atzilus. How do we bring it down to the next three worlds? And the answer is, that comes through Yosef HaTzadik. Why? Because the Torah tells about Yosef HaTzadik, but Yosef hu hashalat al aretz. Yosef was the ruler on the land. Because through Yosef HaTzadik, you were able to bring down that powerful energy which only went to Atzilus with the power of Yaakov into the world, into Aretz, into the land, Bri, Yitzir, and Asiyah. And that's why the Torah says clearly, Eile Toldos Yaakov Yosef. Who's the offspring of Yaakov Yosef? Why? Because Yosef takes the powerful energy that Yaakov started to bring the light of before Atzilus, before the infinite, before the Tzimtzum, before the light, before the highest level, Tiferes HaNelam, down to Atzilus, and Toldos Yaakov, Yosef takes those powerful relations that Yaakov brought into the world of Atzilus, and he brings it down into the world of Bria, Yitzira, and Asiyah. Like Rebbe says, this is the same idea. We find the difference between the Avos, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Matan Torah. And we know that Yosef is connected to Matan Torah. What's Yosef connected to Matan Torah? Because how do we receive the Torah? We received it to Moshe Rabbeinu. And we know Moshe Rabbeinu, before he left Egypt, Vayikach Moshe Siatzmos Yosef Imoi. Moshe took Yosef with him. So Moshe is connected to Torah, but who did he take? We took Yosef HaTzadik. In other words, because when... so the difference between the Avos, Yaakov, and Matan Torah is already Moshe Rabbeinu, which is Yosef, because the drawing down the godly energy by doing mitzvahs of the Avos, we know they were holy, they did all the mitzvahs, but they were only able to draw down to the world of Atzilus. Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov brought to Atzilus. However, in Matan Torah, we had the power and the chiddush, a new idea that we can bring down the revelation into the world of Bria, Yitzira, Asiyah, and Yosef, and Matan Torah, and Moshe Rabbeinu connected the idea of bringing it down into the world of Bria, Yitzira, Asiyah. Now, but the Rebbe says, to be clear, this that the Chassidic Discourse says, that Yosef doesn't bring down straight from the top. He takes the revelation of Yaakov that brought into the world of Atzillah, he brings that down to Bria, Yitzira, Asiyah. So obviously, this that Yosef brings it down into Bria, Yitzira, Asiyah, is because Yosef is the offspring of Yaakov. In other words, through Yosef, we're revealing the essence of Yaakov, which Yaakov, he says, the letters of Yibaka, where he pierced into the world of Atzilus. Because when Yaakov pierced through and brought the highest light through the Kav into the world of Atzilus, because the fact is, Yibaka doesn't really have limits. But through Yaakov, that he brought it down into the Atzilus, even though it technically only went to Atzilus, but it really, in the Atzilus, it had the energy and it had the ability that from there, Yosef was able to bring it down to the world of Bria Tziyasiyah. Now, so Yaakov accomplished it in a revealed way in the world of Atzilus, in a potential way in Bria Tziyasiyah, but how is it revealed in a physical way into the world of Bria Tziyasiyah? That happened through Yosef HaTzadik. And Rebbe says, we'll understand this based on what it's known, that what's the reason why that the Kav stops in Atzilus? Why does it stop in Atzilus? Why doesn't it go further down? And the reason is they explain in Kabbalah, and explain like this. What's the purpose of the Kav? The purpose of the Kav is that the infinite light should come down into this world, but in a way that we should be able to appreciate it. We should be able to connect to it. And in Kabbalah, it's called B'Hislapshus. It should become personalized. The goal of the Kav is the light should be in this world in a personalized way. Now, in order for the light of the come down through the Kav in a personalized way, it can only come into something which is a vessel for godliness. In order to bring down through the Kav powerful light, you need a vessel for it. So in the world of Atzilus, Atzilus is godly. So godly world of Atzilus is a vessel for the light. But in order to bring down the light into the world of Bria Tziyasiyah, it's not gonna work, because the world is a concealment. It's not a vessel for the powerful light. So in order for it to come down to this world, it has to come from a higher place. And as Kav is already not as powerful, it has to come in from Oyer HaSovev, from the all-encompassing light. What's Oyer HaSovev in general is referring to the light before the Tzimtzum. And the light before the Tzimtzum, what is that called? It's called Oyer HaBligol, the infinite light, which is higher than the light that comes into the world. What's the reason? And the Rebbe explains like this. Because when it comes to the Oyer HaBligol, the infinite light, so for the infinite light, as we learned before already, the Tzimtzum doesn't create a concealment. The infinite light didn't change. For us it's a concealment. The infinite light didn't change. So the infinite light shines in a revealed way even after the Tzimtzum all over. And even in the world of Bria Tziyasiyah it's shining. But that's only from the light perspective. However, we don't feel it. But through that it comes through the Kav, from the light before the Tzimtzum, so then the Kav also comes in that way that it gets revealed into the world of Bria Tziyasiyah. So in other words like this, the Kav itself only compares through Atzilus because it needs something for a vessel for it. To go into Bria Tziyasiyah, it can't, because there's no vessel for it. So when it draws in the light into the Kav from Oyer HaBligol, so when it comes into this world, for the Oyer HaBligol, there's no concealment, and that's how it's able to come into this world. So based on this, Rebbe explains beautifully the difference between the piercing of Yaakov, which is the letters of Yibaka, and it's on its own, and also the piercing of Yaakov, which is also letters of Yibaka, the way it gets revealed through Yosef HaTzadik. In the world of Atzilus, so it comes down to the world. Because the piercing of Yaakov, what's the piercing of Yaakov? He's basically breaking all the boundaries of revelation and concealment by drawing down, like we learned before, from Tiferes Hanelam, which is not limited to concealment or revelation, and therefore he's able to bring down the light into the world that was created through the Tzimtzum. So that's what happens on the first level. But the fact is, it broke the boundaries. But even though it came down, but you still have the boundaries and the limits of the revelation itself. In other words, there's a difference between the revelation of Sovev and the revelation of the way something gets enclosed into the world. Because if it's a revelation of Sovev, so then we know it's all over the same thing. That's why it's called Sovev. And on the other hand, when it's limited, so then this has more, this has less, and therefore it can only come into something which has it's a vessel to it. So because you're still dealing, even though he's breaking the boundaries, but there is still boundaries of revelation and concealment, so it can only go into the world of Atzilus where it's a receptacle for it. On the other hand, what happens through Yaakov when he gets enclosed into Yosef? So over there you break not only the boundaries of that it goes into the world of Atzilus, but it actually breaks the boundaries of the revelation itself. That the revelation that beforehand in the first level there's revelation here, but it's still concealed. We don't see it. The concealment still exists, but through Yosef, the revelation is not limited, and it could be every single place. Through Yosef HaTzadik, the power is that there's no obstacle in the revelation, and therefore the revelation can be all over the place. So based on this, the Rebbe explains beautifully why it says in the Chassidic Discourse that the reason that the revelation in the world of Bria, Yetzira, Asiya is specifically through Yosef HaTzadik. Why is that? Because Yosef, in the chart of Kabbalah, on the Spherois, Yosef is connected to which Sphera? Your Sphera of Yesod, which is the last level of the flow of energy. You know, because the Malchus is already a receiver. So the last one that brings out the end of all the flow of energy is Yesod. And the Rebbe says the main pleasure, and we use the word in Hebrew, the main tainug, which is a deep level of pleasure, and the main simcha, the main joy, is when you have the end, at the end of the delivery. And like he explains at length in that Chassidic Discourse. So what he's saying is the reason why Yosef has the power to pierce through and bring down into Bria Tziyasiyah, because Yosef is connected to Yesod, and the main pleasure and the main joy happens through Yesod, the last energy that's energy of giving. So therefore, since it's the last one, that one has the ultimate pleasure, tainug and simcha. So specifically, that's why only through Yosef you're able to bring it down to the world of Bria Tziyasiyah. That's what he says over there. So now Rebbe is going to explain it. What does that mean? He says, one second. What are we saying? That the greatest tainug and simcha is at the end of the giving, which was in Yesod. Why isn't there a reason to say that there's tainug and there's simcha in the beginning of a delivery, in the middle of a delivery? Why only at the end? Chachma bin Adas. There's tainug and simcha, Chachma bin Adas. Chesed Gur Teferes, that's a choid. There's also tainug and simcha. Why are we saying that the main tainug and simcha is dafka in Yesod? And Rebbe explains like this. True, there is tainug, and there is simcha, there is deep pleasure, and there's real happiness in Chachma bin Adas, in all the spheres, etc. But nevertheless, the quality in the tainug and the simcha, in the pleasure and the joy, which is at the last sphere, the sphere Yesod. And again, to be careful, Rebbe says it's a very, very important point. When we're talking about the last point of the giving in Yesod, that doesn't mean the giver's giving it. There's no tainug in just giving it. The tainug is when you're giving it, but the receiver receives it in a good way. Because if you give and there's no one receiving it, there's not that much pleasure there. The pleasure is, let's say you have an idea and you have emotion, then you give it through Yesod, and there's no one to receive it. Where's the tainug and the simcha? So the tainug and the simcha comes from the Yesod, the actual delivery, and there's a receiver on the other side accepting it as good and beautiful. Now, why is that? Because in Yesod, where you can look at the last part, you're actually delivering the goods, and because in the tainug and the simcha of Yesod, you're actually reaching the essence which is higher than any level of giving. And like, practically speaking, what does that mean? Like we know this famous teaching that teaches us, Soif Masev Machshava Tchila. You have an idea. So the idea you have, but then it goes through a whole process. Intellect, emotions, making it happen. And the end, that's what I had in mind initially. So even though it's the end, but that's what you originally had in mind. And it was the end, the action at the end, that which is basically receiving, the one that receives what you were trying to give, that reaches the original intent, the original thought. Even higher than the source of any giving. So that's why Yesod, which goes into Malchus, Yesod, which brings it down to this world, is the greatest simcha because it comes from the highest level. And therefore, through the tainug and the simcha, the pleasure and the joy, which comes at the end, the last part of the giving in Yesod, that finishes off breaking all the limits and all the boundaries of the revelation, the Hashbad Gilui, the Hashbad revelation, and through that, you also have the revelation comes in a way of Islapshus, which internalized and personalized, which brings down the revelation of the Kav even in the world of Bria, Yetzira, Asiya. So again, so you see clearly what the Rebbe is explaining is very simple. The Kav, on one hand, it only goes to Atzilus. Yaakov could only break so far. And why? Because that's the proper vessel. But the fact is, through connecting to Yosef HaTzadik, which means the last sphere, which is connected ultimately to the highest, you're able to pierce through, and the iron Sefer Bligel is actually revealed, literally, physically in this world. So based on this, the Rebbe explains something very, very powerful and beautiful, and he says as follows. That's why he continues on the Chassidic Discourse explain, based on what the Shalah HaKadosh says, that Yaakov HaTzadik is corresponding to the Tefillin Shabarosh, the Tefillin that we wear on our head, and Yosef is the Tefillin that we wear on our hand. Why? Because through the Tefillin that we wear on our head, we create the union, and Tefillin actually comes from the word of connection, is chabros, a connection. We create a union of the infinite light with this world, and by doing that, we bring in more light into Abba Ein, which is Chachma and Bina, and Zeir Ampin, the small face, which is referring to the 6 midos of Atzilus. So again, so you see that Yaakov is connected to Tefillin Shorosh, which brings in light into the intellect and the emotions of the world of Atzilus. Through the Tefillin of the hand, you're able to bring down you're able to bring it down into Malchus. And like it says in the Torah, you should tie as a sign on your hand, and Yadcha comes into word Yad Keh, the weaker hand, and Yad Keh is referring to Malchus. So through the Tefillin Shal Yad, which is connected to Yosef HaTzadik, we create the union of the infinite light, and literally with the creation of the world. And that's why the Rebbe explains on a side note. That's why the Tefillin Shal Rosh is called Pe'er, beauty. Why? Just like, for example, someone puts on a beautiful piece of jewelry, and the Tefillin Shal Yad is called a garment. In other words, why? Because Bri Yitzira Sira is garments. On the other hand, the 10 spheres of Atzilus is called Tikkunim, and a Tikkun is like a Tachshit. So another side note, you see Tefillin Shal Rosh is connected more to the idea of Atzilus, Yaakov, and Tefillin Shal Yad is connected to the world of Bri Yitzira Sira and the idea of Malchus. And that's why Yaakov is more connected to Tefillin Shal Rosh. Yosef is connected to Tefillin Shal Yad. Why? Because Yaakov is the like we call him the Bria Chatichon. You know, so he's connecting the infinite light with the creation. He goes all the way from the infinite to Atzilus, and Yosef connects and Yosef is actually called in Torah. It's called Ben Poiris Yosef, and Poiris is the same meaning as Toifer. To connect, he connects the infinite light with the creation, creations of the creatures of this world. Shall we ask a simple question? 1 second. What did we just learn? That Yaakov is connected to Tefillin Shal Rosh, Atzilus, and Yosef is connected, and intellect and emotions, and Yosef is connected to Tefillin Shal Yad, the world of Bri Yitzira and Malchus. That's the case. In order to have the flow come down where? Into Bri Yitzira, it has to go through Atzilus first. So if that's the case, why are we putting on Tefillin Shal Yad first? If Tefillin Shal Yad represents Bri Yitzira, Malchus, and this is Atzilus, and the intellect, we should put on the Tefillin Shal Rosh first. And Rebbe explains beautifully, and he says like this: based on what it's known, that the mitzvahs of Hashem gave us the commandments, that we do the mitzvahs. Once you have the commandment of Hashem, and then the commandment once we do it. So the commandments once we do it are much higher than the mitzvah itself. Hashem gives you a mitzvah. Okay, it's sitting. Once we do it, the mitzvah becomes real, and it actually goes to a higher level. And to take it a step further, the Rebbe adds, when it comes to the mitzvah of tefillin, it's even more so like that. Why? Because if you give a look at the tefillin of Hashem, what does it say in the tefillin of Hashem? It says like this: Umi ka'amcha Yisrael, who is like the Jewish people, Gayechad Baretz, one nation of the world. In other words, in the tefillin of Hashem, he's praising the Jewish people. So you see that in the tefillin of Hashem is making testimony. No, the mitzvahs of the Jewish people is what's powerful to me. So, and it specifically we see it when it comes to tefillin. So in other words, so that's why we put on the tefillin shel yad first, before we put on the head. Why? Because what does the hand represent? The hand represents this world, Bria, Tzira, Sira, Malchus. Because the work is where, in Kabbalah it's called Yichud Tata, the lower level of union. Where's the lower level? It takes place in the world of Bria, Tzira, Sira. So therefore the spiritual work of Yichud Tata, this world, reaches higher, what we call Yichud Elah, the higher union of the world of Atzilus, and what's added through putting on tefillin, and it actually adds in the tefillin of Hashem, which we draw down the light of Atzilus, tefillin shel Rosh, into the tefillin shel Yad, which is the world of Bria Tziyah. How does that happen? It happens by us putting on tefillin, and how does it happen specifically? It happens when we put on the tefillin shel Yad. Now, So what did we just learn? That when we go ahead and do our mitzvahs in this world, we're actually elevating the mitzvahs of Hashem. Why is that? And the Rebbe explains very simple. Because you know Hashem, before he created the world, before he wrote the Torah and everything, so what does it say? Yisrael alu b'machshava. The thought of the Jewish people came into Hashem's thought, because the fact is, look in the Torah, it says, Daber b'nei Yisrael. Obviously, a thought of the Jewish people exists before the Torah, which is basically the essence of the thought of Hashem, higher than any revelation. Even higher than the revelation of Hashem is Chafetz Chesed, he wants to do kindness, which is the source of all the revelation. Notice the source of the Jewish people comes from a much higher place. So therefore, our source is much higher. So when we do our spiritual work, it means we do our mitzvahs in this world, we're actually elevating the mitzvahs of Hashem, because the mitzvahs come from a lower place, it comes from revelation. We come from a higher place, we come from Olav Machshava. Based on this, Rebbe explains another reason that we add in the tefillin of Hashem is specifically in the tefillin of the hand. Why? Because when we draw down the energy in Bria Yetzirah Asi, which is represented in the tefillin of the hand, where are we reaching? We're actually reaching in the essence higher than revelation, which is the Machshava Atzmi, Yisrael Ol Machshava. So that's why the Rebbe explains why specifically put on Tefillin Sheyad first. Because Tefillin Sheyad, it's where the action is, but more importantly, the source is much higher. And based on this, the Rebbe explains beautifully why the verse, when you open up the Chassidic Discourse, said, וחזקת והיית לאיש. You should be strong and you should be a man. You know, he explains beautifully. What was the first question? 13, you become a man. What do you mean you should be a man? And the Rebbe says very simple. That when someone becomes 13, you become a man, that's nature. You become a man, 100%. That's a gift from Hashem. Hashem made in the nature of the world that when you become 13, you become a human being, you become a man. Now, what did we learn? Where's the real quality? The real quality is when it comes from avodas ha'adam, when we do our work. So therefore, the verse is instructing of וחזקת והיית לאיש. Yeah, you're going to be a man. 13 when the clock changes, you're 13 years old. That's a gift from Hashem. But וחזקת והיית לאיש, when you do your effort, and you put in your effort, that's a whole different level. So based on this, Rebbe explains also why it says וחזקת והיית לאיש. You should be a man. What did we learn? Ish was referring to emotions. Even what was the second question? But the fact is, we become 13, it's all about intellect. So why are you saying emotions? And the answer is, because the truth is, yes, intellect is higher than emotions. But the real quality, when we do our work, we reach the machshava atzmi, it's the essence of a thought. Yisrael al machshava. Where does that happen? That happens when we do the work of etzem hamoichim, which is higher than emotions, but we bring it down into emotions. The goal is not to stay in the world of intellect, to go into the world of it, but bring it down into emotion. That's why specifically, the avodas moichim, but to bring it down into midos. Like we explained before, that what does Yosef HaTzadik do? That he brings Gili, the revelation of Atzilus, which is higher than our source, into Biyah. The goal is to bring the highest level down to the lowest level. And Rebbe finished off and he said he wants to connect this with the spiritual work of the previous Rebbe, who was called Yosef HaTzadik, the Yosef of our generation. That the Chassidic discourse of this Chassidic discourse of וחזקת והיית לאיש was said at the completion of his bar mitzvah celebration. And what was his main work in this world? Was Yafutzu Ma'inasecha Chutza, to spread out the teaching of Chassidus all over the world, like we're doing now, teaching Chassidus all over the world on the internet. That literally in the external world, the lowest of the lowest places, we should draw down, besides the fact of bringing out the wellsprings, but literally the wellspring itself should be drawn down into the world. And by doing this work of spreading Chassidus, spreading the wellsprings of Chassidus all over the world, this is actually a preparation and a vessel for the coming very, very soon and very, very quickly. The Mashiach will come and will reveal himself and will have the ultimate Gula. And then, God willing, our class will be next week in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. So again, a beautiful, beautiful Chassidic discourse with a lot of heavy Kabbalah, with a lot of beautiful lessons. And as you can see, we have the power, especially when we learn Chassidus, to connect to the most highest places, but then bring that powerful energy into this world, and that comes through doing our boida. וחזקת והיית לאיש. And let's hope and pray next class will be in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. Have a great and blessed week. Shavua Tov.